Welcome to Three Little Pigs podcast. We're back after a little hiatus because we had some stuff going on. This is Shannon.
It's Wes.
And Jackson.
And today we are going to talk about our top nutrition myths. In the last episode, we talked about some training myths, and that was a good conversation. Today, we're going to try and keep this podcast a little bit shorter, and we're going to talk about our top 3 nutrition myths. First of all, we're going to talk about the myth of a clean calorie. And I think Wes wanted to talk about this, so we'll let him kick this off.
Yeah, so I'll start out with a question for both of you guys. Is define clean.
Disinfected. I wash it in the sink.
Jackson, how would you define clean?
Not dirty.
So I think what's commonly thought of as clean is like healthy or doesn't affect your body composition in a negative way, which none of us here really believe in a clean calorie, so it would be better to ask somebody.
Or body composition.
So this is why I asked the question, is because even with the answer that you came up with was it's healthy. It's like, okay, let's try to dive into that a little bit more. So I think the idea with the original clean eating that I think kind of developed from bodybuilding is eating foods that are relatively, in most cases, but not all, like minimal ingredient. It's pretty lean protein sources like chicken, things like broccoli, things like rice, and things that aren't through, a fast food or eating out. I think things like that would be typically deemed as quote unquote clean. But I think there are some issues with it, but then it can also be used as a compliance tool. And so I think when you're in a caloric deficit, the idea of clean eating or foods that are not typically ordered through, a fast food place or a restaurant when you're eating out can be beneficial in terms of satiation. They're usually less palatable and less desirable to eat, and they're cheaper. And so if it helps you comply to the diet that you're on, then sure. But the issue is when people say that a clean calorie is better for you than, an unclean calorie, because then that's not supported by evidence whatsoever. And again, you get some issues with your terminology. You could literally have a diet where you count your macronutrients, and if you're getting the daily recommendations of your micronutrients and fiber as well, you'd be just as fine doing that as eating, again, quote-unquote, clean. So it comes down to potentially a compliance tool, but it's something that I think can be an issue because a lot of people get this, I guess, demonizing certain food group mentality, which is not good and something that I would not suggest doing. Realize that it's more complicated than just saying, that food is good or that food is bad. I think in general, you need to look at the bigger picture rather than the specific, I guess, composition of that, food.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
I always say that I hate the term healthy food because I don't think there is such thing. I've gotten arguments about this, especially with family. It's always fun. Yeah. There's no such thing as a healthy food. There is such thing as a healthy diet. And like Wes said, you got to look at the bigger picture. A donut in the context of a healthy diet where you have a variety of foods, you're hitting your fiber, your micronutrients, and your macronutrient goals, is just as good as if you're getting those carbs and that fat from white rice and olive oil. That said, again, it has to come through balance, and you do need to get those micronutrients and fiber. I think on the opposite side of the spectrum, you get idiots who take it too far, and they go,
Yeah.
like, I can survive off Pop-Tarts and protein shakes. And body composition might not be that different, but you might feel like crap.
Yeah, you might feel like crap, and even to that too, like compliance can be a huge problem because you'll really quickly run out of food for the day to eat. Honestly, like that's why eating again clean, I guess, could potentially be a good compliance tool because it's usually more satiating. So.
And those
Yeah.
those clean foods, quote unquote, are generally seen as that is because they are micronutrient dense. Usually is why it's clean and low
Volumes,
calorie or high
yeah.
protein. Things that you want in your diet, but they don't have to make up all of your diet.
And we've said this before in previous podcasts, but tracking your macronutrients can be a very important tool because, what I always talk about with a lot of my clients is developing a relationship with food where you don't, like Wes said,
Making
you don't
love.
Exactly right. When you don't demonize one food group, but you don't overconsume any of the food groups. So, and I think that's a big issue is that, we've talked about this before, people demonizing carbs or demonizing processed foods or demonizing, whatever it is, as long as you can eat and it can fit inside of your daily macronutrients and you're hitting your micronutrient goals, you'll be fine.
Yeah, and there's also something you said about psychological health as well. If you love donuts, eat a fucking donut every once in a while.
Yeah. That'll also help too. I mean, again, unfortunately, most diets are unsuccessful because people cannot comply with the diet in the long run. Everything's going to take time to have a positive effect, and if you're sticking with something for 2 weeks and then yo-yoing back and continuing this process, which we see a lot, it's just suboptimal and it's frustrating. And so I would suggest, doing your best, trying to find a strategy that allows you to comply in the long run and understand the bigger picture and kind of the basic principles behind having a successful diet.
Yep, and what Wes just said is exactly why, even though we say there's no such thing as a clean calorie or clean food or whatever, we still recommend the bulk of your diet should be made up of quote-unquote clean foods, whole foods, things that satiate you, that are easy to hit your macros, just because you're more likely to comply to it and you're more likely to have a successful outcome.
One thing I've noticed too is that when you're counting your macros, it kind of self-selects for you.
Yeah.
Like if you have eaten mainly whole foods, it'll open up a hole in your macros so that you can be like, oh, I can go have ice cream tonight because I've got 50 grams of fat left and I've got plenty of carbs and I'm pretty much near my protein goal, or however it ends up happening. Or you get to a point where you're like, well, I'm only eating chicken breast tonight because I've literally had all my fat and all my carbs, and this is the only way that's going to work. So it kind of self-selects when you're counting.
Yeah, I think the idea of a clean food can be helpful in a way.
Yeah.
Because especially if you're not working directly with a person all the time with their nutrition, because counting macros can be complicated, can be hard for people to stick to. Usually, the first change I make for anybody is eat clean foods, eat whole foods, because it ends up everything that we would talk about later ends up falling into place.
Yeah, I think a lot of times too, when the general population thinks of a clean food, they think of something like, lean meats, vegetables, and fruits. So they're usually pretty voluminous foods, pretty fibrous, pretty nutrient dense, usually, full of protein. And again, those foods are incredibly beneficial, especially if so I think one of the reasons that bodybuilders like it so much is because when they're, in contest prep and getting really, really lean, one of the issues is just this constant desire to eat, hunger, especially when you're in such a caloric deficit that eating foods that are relatively filling, and can almost kind of have like a appetite suppressant effect, or even just leave you feeling satiated, are more desirable than just like, hey, I'm gonna eat a bunch of Pop-Tarts and some protein shakes.
Yeah, it's a lot harder
Yeah.
to eat a bunch of shitty dried chicken breast than
Yeah.
a donut and a
Yeah.
milkshake. All right, that was. I think we can wrap up that topic. Our next topic kind of segues well because we talked about demonizing food groups, and this is very popular right now on social media and just in general because it kind of goes in trends. But right now, what's really popular is demonizing carbohydrates,
Yeah.
carbs, the keto diet. We've talked about this before in the podcast, but it's kind of like near and dear to all our hearts because we love our carbs and we want everybody else to love carbs. So why shouldn't we, Wes? Why shouldn't we? Or actually, I'll go to Jackson. Wes always talks. Why should we demonize carbs, Jackson?
So let's, before I answer that, I think that people like the low carb diet because you do see instant scale results, and the majority of that is water weight. And so people think that it's, a miracle diet. But anyway, the reason that I like all of my clients to consume a healthy amount of carbohydrates is simply for progress with training. It's very difficult to have a balanced work life, personal life, and training regimen when you're not consuming any carbohydrates or inadequate carbohydrates. And I also think, too, that people demonize carbs because there's been this, anti-sugar fad that's gone on for multiple years now. But that kind of has spread from just like refined sugars to carbohydrates in general. But yeah, the main reason that I would say consume carbs is so that your training can be productive and you can benefit from your training.
Yeah, and we've talked about this probably a dozen times in other podcasts, but there's no reason, or we're not saying that a low carb or no carb diet doesn't work, because it does, but it works for the same reason all other diets work. And it's because when you eliminate a whole food group, you're probably not going to eat as many calories as you're eating. And it's harder to eat just meats and veggies and get fat on that. Although I try sometimes.
Yeah, I think my issue isn't with the keto diet itself. It's with the claims that the, I guess, heralds of the keto diet spread on social media, making it seem like it's, a revolutionary diet, or performance is through the roof, or weight loss and body composition will be through the roof, which just isn't true. However, if it's a diet that you can comply with, then great, stick with it. But I think my issue with a lot of the things in the fitness industry are not the things themselves, but the claims behind their success, which is false, or I guess a poor observation that isn't backed by evidence. And so, like Shannon was saying, these things work all the same. So, like, if you can create a caloric deficit with a different diet than someone else is doing, and you're both in a caloric deficit, and you're meeting to your calorie and macronutrient, or even sometimes not even necessarily your macronutrient demands, because the keto would be basically high fat, moderate protein, basically no carb. But in general, if you can get into a caloric deficit, then you can still create a deficit. So again, kind of looking back at the big picture is create an energy deficit to lose weight over time and find a strategy that allows you to comply with that in the long run. And then some of my issues are some of the performance claims that I've heard. There's literally no literature, no evidence suggesting that that is better than a diet. I guess your quote unquote traditional diet of, having fats, carbs, and protein in your diet. There's maybe a potential for really long distance endurance athletes, maybe, but still more evidence needs to come out on that. But yeah, so some of the big claims just don't hold true. And again, if it's something that you can comply with, then great. But don't buy into all the charlatans and snake oil salesmen saying it's great for this magical reason when it really isn't.
I think, as Jackson stated earlier, it's quite the opposite. That it's carbohydrates are critically important for performance.
Yeah.
It's not just that. It's definitely not that keto or low carb diets are good for better for performance. It's the opposite. They're worse for performance. Carbohydrates are important for recovery. They're important for just the actual performance itself, in terms of like muscle glycogen and stuff like that. It's
Alertness.
It's your body's preferred source of fuel. So if you eliminate it, I just don't see a way that performance can increase.
I totally agree. And I don't even, one of the reasons I don't suggest it is I don't even see a compliance increase. I think it's much harder to comply with the keto diet than a traditional diet. And so again, it's like, if that's a tool in the toolbox and someone loves it or has a high belief system in it and they think it's going to work and they stick with it, then sure. But I really have not seen success with it. I haven't seen success with it in literature. I think it's incredibly difficult to comply with. In maybe some certain circumstances, people have a high belief system in it, they buy into it, but yeah, I don't think they're...
I think that it's one of my issues with most diet fads is they're just not sustainable as far as like, if you can look at yourself and say, am I going to be doing this in 5 days, 5 months, 5 years? And there's a good chance you're not going to be doing it in 5 months. And so what happens when you start to create habits that as soon as you reintroduce carbohydrates, you don't understand how to regulate your carbohydrates? As far as like, you don't understand the relationship between fats, carbs, and protein. Because, I mean, one thing that happened to me, and I've tried almost every fad diet and exercise, but when I was on keto, I was having, really, really high fat and high protein meats, which aren't bad. But the issue was when I started counting again, it was really hard for me to make the transition from, like, oh, I get to eat bacon and, all this other stuff. And then
you're having both.
Yeah. Or you put butter on everything. And it's not that any of these things are bad. It's just that you have to, when you're counting your macronutrients, you have to choose like based on the macronutrients you're allowed for that day. And so again, it comes back to that relationship with food. If you're not going to have a relationship at all with carbohydrates, do you really seeing yourself not eating carbs for the rest of your life? I think that's going to be a tough one to stick to.
I'd rather swallow a bullet.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
Yep.
All right. That wraps up that topic. Eat your carbs, ladies and gentlemen. The next one. This one's a popular one for any bro or any really person who first starts lifting. I think we all believed it in high school. Many of us know people who still believe it. Clients still believe it. And that is the anabolic window. The idea that if you don't get your protein powder or your protein in like 20 minutes after your workout, you're fucked. You're going to lose all your gains.
Yep.
You're going to be skinny forever.
Weak.
You look like Gollum if you don't get your goddamn protein powder. And this idea is hilarious. But Wes, I'm sure Wes has read some research. I don't know the actual literature on it, so I'm going to let him talk.
Yeah, so basically I think the anabolic window, at least in the terms that the traditional bro knows it, is you have this brief period of time where you can get your protein in post-workout to optimize your gains, and if you don't get it in that window, you're screwed, or you're not optimizing your gains. And that window is far longer than all the bros seem. And it's almost not even, I think it's been coined anabolic window, and people still refer to it as the anabolic window.
It's like the span of a day
really
or two,
like
right?
48 hours to 72
Yeah.
hours post-workout. So it's like, just keep eating and you're fine. Eat your meals, you're good.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so that answers that question.
Yeah.
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 Everything's like muscles are built like in a second. Like if you
Yeah.
don't get your nutrients in 20 minutes,
Yeah.
you're fucked. It's like your body doesn't work like that.
Yeah, just
It
shuts
takes
off.
time.
Yeah.
I think it's funny too, because like you look at like just anecdotally, how many times have you trained at night and just went home and gone to bed? I've done that multiple times, and I've continuously gotten bigger and stronger. It's like if that didn't work, then you would just continuously get smaller and weaker.
I think this is a good coming full circle now from our first question to second question to now is understand your priorities, get the amount of calories and macronutrients you're in, you're good. Keep training, do your best to comply to a diet.
Yep.
See success.
Be
consistent.
We talked about this in our first nutrition podcast, so like priorities, nutritional priorities, and like meal timing might play the tiniest role in terms of progress.
I would
But
say
if you don't,
especially in terms of just performance in the gym, it's if you have one bolus, the snake diet, the one bolus, and then you train 8 hours later in the day, you'll probably see some performance decrease. But
for acute performance, I think it's more important.
Yeah.
But for overall like body composition changes and stuff, it's still important in a tiny way. Yeah. But if you don't have the bigger things, in place, then you're tripping over dollars to pick up dimes.
What's funny is most people tend to prioritize the small stuff.
Yeah.
Compared
it's
to
the fun stuff like supplements.
Well, it's because it's gimmicky. It's one quick fix.
Yeah.
This is why. Here are the foods that you shouldn't eat to. It's decreasing your testosterone.
Well,
it's like,
my God. And all the money is there in the industry, compared to there's not many. The macronutrient industry is the grocery industry. And it's a lot of it just comes down to discipline, which is really tough. It's so simple and it seems so simple, but it's actually the toughest part of all of this. Is whether you're trying to get bigger, leaner, whatever the case may be, the discipline to eat enough and make sure that you're not over-consuming or under-consuming can be very difficult.
Consistency and time. So that wraps up the three of our top nutritional myths. You guys have any other funny ones we can talk about for a second? There's got to be a bunch.
Oh, nutritional myths? Oh, boy.
Or funny stories. I remember, you guys ever watch Pete Rubbish videos?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I used to watch him a lot, and when I first started powerlifting under Logan and stuff, I would drink 2 liters of juice for my pre-workout carbs. Holy shit, that was 1,000 calories in fucking lemonade.
I have another myth that's really funny that I used to really buy into, which again is really dumb, is the idea that calories have a clock and that you shouldn't eat past a certain amount of time in the evening or else it's all going to be stored as fat immediately. And so I would have my last meal at 6 and not eat again. And so it's like, again, look big picture, get the amount of calories that you need in for the day. All these other things are very, very small, if not even supported by evidence, if not even a real thing. So just think about the big picture and try to find consistency over time.
What about caffeine and adrenal fatigue?
Oh, God.
Let's save that one for a supplement
Yeah.
podcast. Just drink your caffeine.
Yeah, drink your caffeine and have your carbs. Enjoy life.
And explain to me what adrenal fatigue is.
Yeah.
My adrenals aren't working.
Yeah.
And my CNS is fried.
My cortisol is...
Yeah.
Wes, what do you think about the vertical diet?
I think that the vertical diet is literally nothing fancy because it's literally just a diet in which you should eat, food groups that don't cause individual digestion issues and eat more of that over time. So it's like, I think Stan is a well-spoken guy, and I think that he's done great things as an athlete, and I think that he's doing more good than bad, but I don't think it's like any specific diet. It's like just a strategy that doesn't really make sense to put it in its own category as a diet. So I think it's kind of misnamed, but it's clicky and people like it.
It's a way for him to sell it. But,
Yeah.
I mean, I like Stan because he literally says, this is not a magic bullet. This is what worked for me. This is what worked for my clients. It's not a magic diet. It is an implementation of dietary strategies.
Yeah.
He literally says that. That it's just a way to, it's still all about controlling your calories and your macros. It's just here's a specific way to do it that's worked for me and worked for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I think for somebody who eats 6,000 calories a day, fucking digestion issues are probably important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a
Plus, I love steak, so I'm
good
doing
with it.
some of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although I still eat other stuff like donuts.
I mean, like I said, as long as your compliance is there, who really cares?
Although there's some weird things like like his carrot a day, and like
Yeah, I think some of the things are
again the small things.
yeah, small things, and some of the claims I think are a lot of it is through his own experience and anecdote, and especially on some of the foods that he's had success with.
The
I think he's
unique ones,
implemented
yeah.
that are kind of just like, okay, man, but
Yeah.
I don't really think, honestly. I think, again, the idea is find something you can comply with. Get your calories, get your fiber, get your micronutrients in, and then sleep and train. There you go.
Yep.
And then be consistent over time or do your best. So.
All right, that wraps up our first shorter nutrition podcast. If you have any questions, leave them down below or in each of our Instagram pages. Wes, where can they find you on Instagram?
At Wes_LikeIronStrong.
No, aren't you like Iron Strong _Wes?
Is it?
I think it is.
Let me
You
check.
can
sure
follow
it is.
me at
Let me check
Williams
really
_BSB.
You can find both Wes and I
Yeah.
at Like Iron Strong on Instagram.
Yeah, and my individual is like.iron.strong_Wes. Thanks for the correction, Shannon.
I'm really surprised that it's not like small X, big X.
Yeah, coming from the Instagram,
The Big Wes.
the Instagram
Big
king.
X, small
Wes
X.
posts some just riveting things. Like it breaks the web.
Yeah.
And you can follow us on Three Little Pigs Cast on Instagram. All right. Leave your questions below. We're going to do a Q&A at some point. Have a good one.